This week on the show, was eBay's fourth quarter less than meets the eye? eBay's also changing course on their recent fishes announcement, and Etsy has some search problems. What is up, Galaxians? Welcome to episode number 288 of the Galaxy CDs, Rocks, and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and I'm going to bring you some more reselling news. Only a handful of things to go over today, but a few fairly important ones, including eBay's fourth quarter results, which were positive, but maybe not quite what meets the eye. We've got a couple of other updates from eBay and from Etsy as well. And then at the back end of the show, I will have a what sold recap. Got about a dozen things for you this week. There will be timestamps, as always, to the various sections of the show. So if you want to go to something specific, you can do that. But with that, let's get in to this reselling news.
News updates.
So eBay announced their fourth quarter earnings, and they were largely positive, though they did give weak Q1 guidance. So the stock suffered a little bit. I'm not going to get into the stock prices. That's not really what we're here for. But I did want to talk about these results and how it's important sometimes to take maybe a little bit deeper dive into how they get to those. Because again, on the surface, these results looked pretty good. Reasonably good. I've talked on this show numerous times about eBay essentially having flat to no growth, in some cases even negative growth. They did show a little bit of gross merchandise volume growth in Q4, but it may have come from sources that are not necessarily sustainable or, to be fair, have anything to do with anything that eBay has actually done. So their fourth quarter results and their weak Q1 guidance exacerbated concerns about consumer confidence, and CEO Jamie Iannone showing no signs of having any idea how to grow gross merchandise volume and revenue besides shipping rate increases, legacy discounting tactics, and stealth ad fee hikes, all of which we've talked about. This article is over on Value Added Resource, and these, of course, will be linked in the show notes and the video description down below. Some of the key takeaways from the press release: revenue for the quarter was up $2.6 billion, which is up 1% as reported and FX neutral basis. So it's up, but 1% is, I guess, given the broader economy, it's hard to argue. You'll take 1%, but it's not a big number. Gross merchandise volume, what they refer to as GMV, was $19.3 billion, which was up 4% on an as reported basis, or 3% on an FX neutral basis. We're going to dive much deeper into that here in just a moment. And they returned $1 billion with a B to stockholders in Q4, which included $900 million in share repurchases and $128 million in cash paid as dividends to shareholders. So if you were a shareholder, good for you. You got some money. Total active buyers on eBay were reported at 134 million, which is where they were in Q4 2022, so 2 years ago. So they've had essentially no growth in active buyers in the fourth quarter for the last couple of years. That means that eBay managed to eke out only a 1% boost to active buyers with significant discounting in the quarter, a tactic that previous CEO Devin Wenig was often criticized for back in 2008 and 2019. However, despite that minor growth, eBay is still now at 11 consecutive quarters with less active buyers than they had in the first quarter of 2018. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this chart here where there was nice steady growth. There was a big bump, which is the COVID time period where people were stuck at home and were shopping online. And all the sites had just massive bumps. So I don't think anybody is necessarily expecting those sorts of numbers. But if you look at the steady decline that happened after the pandemic restrictions were lifted, they very quickly fell back to 2018 levels and then substantially below those, where they have remained for the last now 11 consecutive quarters. So again, no growth, and that comes on the heels of there was steady growth, kind of a plateau, the big COVID bump, and then fell off a cliff, essentially, is what has happened. eBay also changed the definition of GMV and active buyers at the end of 2021 and restated both figures. That goes back to 2018. The chart that we just showed you does reflect those restated figures. So they made an adjustment once again. eBay did decline to provide active seller figures, which were last reported in Q4 of 2021 at 17 million. So no way to tell really whether that number is up or down. There has been a lot of hullabaloo in the YouTube reselling community about sellers leaving eBay in droves. There's also always new sellers coming on board, so my expectation would be that number's probably fairly flat. It's probably in that same ballpark, but it's interesting nonetheless that eBay continues to not want to share that number. Enthusiast buyers, which eBay defines as those with at least 6 purchase days and a minimum of $800 spent in the last 12 months, are still stuck at 16 million, which is where they've been since, again, Q4 of 2022. This is and has been, it does seem to be a little bit less so these days, but this has been eBay's growth strategy, is to capitalize on these quote unquote enthusiast buyers. And for now 2 years running, they've not been able to grow that number. So they're going to have to look elsewhere for growth. That means the steep, roughly 30% discounts that eBay is pumping out in both Q4 and Q1, specifically targeted at turning casual sellers into enthusiast buyers, did not significantly move the needle. Both the CEO and CFO, Steve Priest, were proud of pulling off a 4% GMV growth in what they say continues to be a difficult macroeconomic environment, which is what all of these platforms have been saying for essentially the last 2 years now. But that number, as we discussed at the top, is likely not nearly as impressive as eBay would like you to think. Remember, eBay defines gross merchandise volume as the total value of all paid transactions between users on our marketplace platforms during the applicable period, inclusive of shipping fees and taxes. So that GMV figure is not just the items that are sold, it's shipping and taxes. That means, according to this article and to basic math, that when shipping prices or taxes go up, like the USPS zip code based rate changes that took place in September, or when USPS and other carriers institute peak pricing and or surcharges for the holidays, eBay gets a gross merchandise volume bump from those increased prices without actually having to do anything to increase sales on the platform. So if the price of shipping an item for Ground Advantage, say, goes from $5 to $5.50, that extra 50 cents eBay counts as increased GMV, even though they didn't do anything to earn it. To be fair, they also collect additional fees on that, so it is a big revenue boost for them as well. I don't know. I don't actually get these reports and dive into them. I don't know if they break out how much of their reported GMV falls into the various categories. How much of it is merchandise sales? How much of it is shipping? How much of it is taxes? I assume they probably don't, that they just report it as GMV, kind of as a bulk number. But that would be really interesting to see the breakout there and how that has changed over time, because as we have discussed here over the last several years, postal rate increases have been consistent and pretty substantial. Going back, 3-4 years, the prices have increased significantly for shipping on all, not just the U.S. Postal Service, all of the different shipping carriers have raised their rates over that time. And that has all led to increased revenue and gross merchandise volume for eBay. So your expectation would be that their actual sales, if you will, of merchandise is probably significantly down because you've had this massive increase in all these other fees. Plus, when eBay raised the promoted listings dynamic ad rate minimum from 2 to 5% and the promoted listing priority cost per click minimum from 2 cents to 20 cents back in November, many sellers likely raised their item prices to compensate for the additional costs, which would have also given eBay a GMV bump without actually having to do anything to increase sales on their platform. So here is a case where they would have made more for less because sellers increased their price to compensate for the fact that the click rates had gone up, So they got more money from the clicks. They got more money when those clicks turned into sales because the sales prices went up. It's a win-win-win. And they collected more fees because the now base selling price had increased. So I guess you could say there's a method to the madness, but it does call into question a 4% growth, while nice, is not a significantly large number. And when you start layering in all of these other things that are technically not really what you and I would consider to be actual sales, it calls into question whether that number is actually legitimate. Speaking of advertising, first party ad revenue, which is for all the various programs that eBay currently offers, grew again by 16% to $434 million. So it is an ever increasing piece of their pie, which we have talked about again numerous times here. Approximately 3.14 million sellers adopted a single ad product during the quarter, and eBay ended the quarter with more than 1.1 billion live promoted listings out of nearly 2.3 billion total listings. Those numbers to me are really, really interesting, and you can let me know in the comments what your take is on any of this. But I find it really interesting that nearly half of the listings on eBay are currently being promoted, 1.1 billion out of 2.3 billion, but that only reflects 3.14 million sellers who are using it. So that would indicate to me that this is primarily us, a kind of professional or quasi-professional sellers who are using these programs. I would be one of the 3.14 million, and I've got 11,000 plus listings. So I make up a not insignificant chunk of that, and probably so do you. So it's a fairly, if we assume that their actual number of sellers is still somewhere in the, say, 15 to 18 million number, you're talking about less than 20% of their sellers are actually using promoted listings, but it accounts for nearly half of the current live listings. So that's a really interesting number. And again, goes to how eBay is continuing to grow gross merchandise volume and revenue through these ad products rather than necessarily through growing their actual sales business. So let me know what you think down in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube or listening over on Spotify. This just happened. I'm recording this on Saturday. This happened on Friday, and it happens pretty much every year. And I've got a couple of hot takes on this. eBay listings, quote unquote, disappear in an annual recurring glitch. So this is an interesting one. eBay sellers are once again reporting listings which are supposed to renew today are instead disappearing in what appears to be an annual recurring February glitch. The community forum is being flooded with posts about the problem, with some sellers saying they've lost hundreds of listings so far. Here's one example: 76 listings just disappeared. No explanation. Was finishing month-end updates and listings and realized 76 listings had just disappeared. No notice, no explanation. Anybody else finding this problem? Another one says same, and I got eBay concierge on the phone about it. We figured out good till canceled listings are not relisting, and it seems to be a glitch. I'm going to come back to that. Bookmark that comment because that is not correct. It's bizarre because if you track an item number that is ended and should have been relisted and type it into search, it won't show up. However, if you search your active items with the item number, it does come up, but is blank for how much time is left. If you keep the page open from right before it ends and refresh after it ends, the page is still there. Seems to be a glitch, but I'm losing listings by the minute, and I hope eBay figures it out. To eBay's credit, and I'm of two minds on this. They did put out an official statement in the community forums calling the issue a technical data processing delay due to an annual increase in system activity experienced during this period. So, gosh, that's really small, but I'll try to read this. We're currently experiencing a technical data processing delay that has temporarily impacted the timely processing of some good till canceled renewals, affecting the visibility of certain seller listing and listing count on active listings across platforms. This is due to an annual increase in system activity experienced during this period. The cause of this is that eBay tries to renew things for blocks of 30 days. And on February 28th or 29th, you now have 2 or 3 days worth of listings that are all processing on one day because there is no 29th or 30th in most February. So you've got 2, maybe 3 days worth of these that are essentially coming up for renewal all at the same time. And it causes this to be a bit of a backlog. Our team is actively working to address the issue by implementing measures to increase our processing capacity. We expect the situation to improve shortly and anticipate full resolution by 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow, which was today, March 1st. While you might observe fluctuations in your active listing counts, please be assured that your listings remain available to buyers to view and purchase. Our team is closely monitoring the situation. So, 2 things here. This has been going on for years. eBay knows this is going to happen. Why don't they fix it? Why don't they prepare in advance for this known issue with renewals and increase that capacity ahead of time so that when that day hits, this issue does not crop up? I don't know. So credit to eBay for at least acknowledging this issue in fairly timely fashion and for telling people, hey, it's good. It's not normal, but it's normal, if that makes sense, and it's going to resolve itself. We're doing what we can to speed the process. My other issue here is, unfortunately, with sellers who don't take the time to do any further research on this. They just immediately go to the message boards and say, I'm losing hundreds or thousands of listings. Nothing was lost. It took me less than 5 minutes to watch a listing of mine expire, see that it was not showing up on my seller hub as a listing, but searching for that listing within my seller hub and finding that that listing actually was there. And as one person stated, was showing that there was no good till date. So it didn't say how long it had left to run. Most importantly, if I then went to the main eBay site, like I was a buyer, and searched for that exact item, it came up as available for sale. If I was a customer and I was looking for the item that I had just supposedly lost, I would have found that it was in fact still available. We're so quick to jump down eBay's throat for things like this without taking the extra step to make sure that what we think is the problem is actually the problem. These listings were not disappearing. They were not available for sale at any point. This was, it shouldn't have happened. Full disclosure, I agree. It should not have happened. eBay knows this happens every year. They should be prepared for it. They should have a resolution in place so that it does not occur. But what was actually occurring was not lost listings. It was lost reporting within the seller hub and inaccurate counts. And as is often the case with eBay, it was not consistent across multiple devices. So I watched on the web version as my listing count continued to decrease throughout the afternoon on the 28th. On my mobile app, however, my listing count was spot on the entire day. For whatever reason, when I pulled up my seller hub on mobile, on Android, my listing count was correct throughout the day. The only time it was going down was when I deleted a listing that had sold on another platform or when someone made a purchase on eBay of one of my items. That count was correct. So that, again, would have been another check for any seller who was concerned that there was a problem with their listings disappearing. You had 2 pieces of information here, one that said nothing was disappearing and another one that was reporting that something was amiss. But had you, again, taken the next step to go search for that listing, you would have seen that it was still available. Again, this is a problem that eBay is aware of. They should have corrective action in place in advance, or at the very least, post a message like they did late that earlier in the beginning, on February 20th. Hey, this is going to happen at the end of the month because of all these extra renewals that have to take place. Nothing is going to be lost. Please don't worry about it. Sellers still will because they don't read these things. They don't pay enough attention to what's going on by and large. But at least they would have been out in front of it. So there's my free PR advice to eBay. This is going to happen. If you can't prepare for it in advance and fix it so that it doesn't occur, at least put out a notice like this in advance so that sellers are aware of what's coming and they don't freak out. And then sellers, my advice to you again is number one, don't immediately freak out. Take a little bit of time and do some research and make sure what's actually going on before you run to the eBay forums or to Facebook and say, eBay is trash, it's not working again. This is a case where something was not working, but it was not what people were accusing eBay of. Listings were not disappearing. Also, to eBay's credit, by the afternoon on the 28th, I saw my listing count on the website actually increasing as those listings were processing through the system. So this didn't even last a full day. I assume probably well before 7 a.m. on Saturday the 1st, this issue was completely resolved. We need to take a breath. Lord knows I have talked a lot on this channel over the last couple of months about ongoing problems with eBay. And again, I don't mean to absolve them from this issue. There clearly was an issue. But we as sellers need to not run off the end of the earth when these things occur, when they're not as bad as what they first seem, at least before we do some further research to determine exactly what is going on. So I'll get off my soapbox on that issue, which is completely resolved as far as I know by now. My listing counts by the time I got up this morning and got to listing were 100% correct. This article is over on e-commerce bites. We talked last week about eBay changing their live animal policy that had banned tropical fish. That didn't last a full week. eBay shook up the aquatics hobby last week when it informed sellers it would no longer allow the sale of tropical fish and certain other animals. On Monday, it reversed course and abandoned those changes to its live animal policy. eBay had informed sellers through a February 19th email that they would have 30 days before they'd be required to comply with the new live animal policy. On February 24th, it sent sellers in the category another email informing them that it was dumping this new policy and reverted the policy page back to its former state. Great news for sellers and buyers. The letter said, "Dear seller, after listening to feedback from our community of buyers and sellers, we hear your passion for being able to buy and sell live fish and certain other live animals on eBay." The sea monkeys were in the clear, but now everything will be back as it was. Although we had shared plans to discontinue this category in March, we have decided, based on this feedback, that we will not be changing our policy and will continue to allow approved live fishes, bait, bees, crickets, and ladybugs when shipped in compliance with shipping carrier requirements or restrictions. For a full list of live animals we allow, you can review our live animals policy on our help page. So all is well. Everything's back to normal. If you were a seller that was going to be affected by this change, this is great news for you. They have abandoned that policy change. So good on them, again, for listening to the community. The caveat, of course, to this would be that you as a seller need to make sure that you are abiding by whatever the requirements are for the shipping carrier that you're using. And of course, whatever eBay's actual policies are in that category. As we talked about when we discussed the change originally in this policy, we have to assume that there has been some regulatory pressure put on eBay to get this particular segment under control. And I would assume there will be some crackdowns, that they're going to be paying a little bit more attention to this. So if you're a seller in this category, this is good news to the extent that you're paying attention and doing things the right way. Last bit of news for today. This is, again, on value-added resource, and it refers to Etsy's search. Now, we've talked on more than one occasion about the search results on many of these sites not being, how shall we say, very good, not being super accurate. They're attempting to use ever more advanced algorithms and, in some cases, AI, large language models, to try to present to you things that they think you might be searching for, or things that might be related to the thing that you put into the search bar, instead of just returning things that actually match your search results. Etsy is having a particular issue with their AI-powered search, and the question has been raised, who's responsible when those search results pose potential harm to customers. As Etsy has ramped up efforts to use AI to boost search and discovery capabilities, users have noticed an increase in irrelevant results. Yes, but what happens when that irrelevance turns to potentially harmful with sellers stuck in the middle? Etsy seller and e-commerce consultant Cindy Baldassi recently shared one concerning example over on LinkedIn, showing how faulty AI puts consumers and sellers at risk by showing inaccurate search results. She related the story of Etsy seller Marmalady, who received a one-star review from a buyer who says the lemon drizzle cake they purchased was advertised as vegan, even though it had eggs in it. In responding to the review, Marmalady clarified the listing includes a full ingredients and allergens list, which does include eggs and milk products, but Etsy's poor search algorithm may nonetheless show non-vegan cakes in explicit searches for vegan products, with sellers having no input or ability to control the results. A screenshot of search results that Baldassi credits to Marmalady shows exactly that. This lemon drizzle cake in question comes up with searching the term vegan cake along with other items which are not vegan. And if you keep scrolling, you'll likely even find some items which are not even cake. You can't get much more irrelevant than that. All kidding aside, this could be a potentially dangerous situation for someone who has really bad food allergies. And Etsy, in their ever-expanding quest to present as many options to try to make a sale to a potential buyer as possible, it seems like they're returning all kinds of results. They're looking at maybe those search terms individually, cake and vegan and so on, rather than looking at that as one kind of coherent, connected search. So you search for vegan cake and it just starts showing you all kinds of cakes because cake is in your search. And that obviously could be problematic because customers, as we're all aware, do not read. They don't read the descriptions. They don't read, this seller went through the trouble of putting in a list of ingredients and a list of allergens on the listing. This person did their search for a vegan cake. This thing popped up. The customer looked at the picture, saw a add to cart link or whatever, went ahead and added to the cart, didn't bother to go to the actual listing probably and read the listing. They just bought the cake. And it turned out it was wrong. And it was wrong because Etsy gave essentially inaccurate or irrelevant search results. No good. I mean, and when you're searching for a Hot Wheel or whatever, and you get all kinds of random stupid results, it's not that big a deal. But if you're looking for a vegan cake because you have food allergies, you need those results to be accurate. So Etsy, for their part, as is their norm, refused to remove the review, which is, the article says, wholly unfair since it would appear any confusion was caused by Etsy, not the seller, and the entire situation was out of the seller's control. To be fair, Etsy, in my experience, simply does not remove reviews. Period, full stop, the end. They fall back on FTC guidance that those reviews are the opinions of the buyers and they should not be edited in any way or moderated in any way by the sites, even if they are inaccurate, defamatory, incorrect. I had a case I mentioned a few weeks ago, was totally on a different item from another seller. I could not get Etsy to remove it. They do not, we've said this before, these platforms do not have your back, period. It's frustrating. It's really aggravating. And especially in a case like this, where the seller has done literally everything correctly, and Etsy still refused to remove the review. The item page, they point out, does not use the word vegan at all. This isn't a case of a seller-created keyword confusion, and in fact, the listing is quite clear in showing that the product did, in fact, contain eggs. Unfortunately, due to the way Etsy tries to get buyers to jump straight to checkout with add to cart buttons, quick views, and other functionality in search, it is, as I mentioned, entirely possible that the buyer may not have even ever viewed the full listing page. Again, to be fair, the buyer has some responsibility, just like I talked about sellers having some responsibility to do some further research. Don't just add it to the cart on the first result. Go look at the listing, read the details, make sure what you're buying before you buy. You can't absolve the buyer from responsibility in this. Yes, Etsy returned irrelevant results that were incorrect, but the buyer did not do their part as a consumer of due diligence to make sure that the thing they were buying was actually the thing that they wanted. I don't know, to be completely fair, how you would protect yourself as a seller, because again, in this case, this seller did everything right. List of ingredients, list of allergens, no incorrect keywords, nothing to try to get her item to show up in a search that was had anything to do with vegan, and yet there it was. And again, no protection from the platform, and a bad review from the buyer when the only person in this entire transaction who actually did everything right was the seller. And the seller's the one that got punished. I just don't understand. Again, it just goes back to they don't have your back. We are a means to an end for these platforms, which is to make them money. They do not care about you as an individual. They do not care about you as a seller. They do not care about the stuff that you sell, other than to the extent that it either makes them money or potentially causes them some sort of legal exposure because you're selling something illegal. Beyond that, they don't give a damn about you, to be frank. Etsy often moves descriptions around on the page or sometimes hides them behind a click wall where the buyer may not notice or click through to see full details. As Etsy astutely points out, this raises broader questions about marketplace accountability and liability, especially with products where an allergy, as I mentioned, could cause significant harm or even death to consumers. It's quite likely the buyer, as I said, searched and found the item through this or a similar search, didn't read the whole listing before purchase. After all, Etsy hides most of the description anyway, depending on the platform you're viewing it on. You need to click to read more. Shouldn't the marketplace have to take responsibility when it's the reason this product is misrepresented as having no animal products? What would happen if the buyer was allergic to eggs or milk? Would Etsy just shrug and say, not our problem? It's better to show potentially dangerous items in the wrong searches, or to hide potentially relevant items that lacked the correct keywords, because that is why Etsy shows so many listings that lack the search terms. The goal is to make sure that popular goods are shown whether or not the seller knew the right words to optimize with. If Etsy is doing this, shouldn't they remove the Add to Cart button from search results, highlighted with an arrow in the screenshot that appeared up above? And again, there'll be links to all this in the show notes and video description down below. In potentially dangerous sets of results, that button allows buyers to purchase without reading a word of the description or the ingredients list. I would agree with all of that, especially for food items. Etsy probably needs to make some changes here in how easy it is for a customer to make a purchase. They need to find a way really to almost force buyers to go to the listing and look at the list of ingredients, and or maybe have a checkbox at checkout that the buyer acknowledges that they have read the list of ingredients on this item before purchasing. Doing something to force the buyer to do the thing that they're not doing, which is to go back and fully read that listing. As I said, while the customer has some responsibility to ensure they're buying a safe product, the blame here clearly needs to be shared by the AI-driven algorithm that doesn't know something that lists egg and milk as ingredients is not vegan, and the company directors who so desperately want to make every last sale that they allow this potentially dangerous practice to continue and even make it easier to purchase without reviewing the product details. Let me know what you think of all of that. This was one of those things. The review essentially said 1 star. This was listed as vegan. It wasn't. The birds loved it, but it was useless to me. The person did not eat it. Apparently, there was a list of ingredients included either on the packaging or with the product so that the consumer was able to see. Again, kudos to the seller who apparently took an extra step here so that when the buyer got the thing, there was one last layer of protection to show, hey, this thing's got milk and eggs in it. And the buyer did not, in fact, end up eating it. But this could potentially be a problem down the road. Anyway, if you got something out of that, hey, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. If you are not a subscriber to the YouTube channel or a follower of the podcast, please consider doing that as well. Would love to have you on board. With that, let's do some What Sold. Like I said, I think I've got about a dozen things here for you. Mix eBay and Etsy this week. This first one, I Married Adventure by Osa Johnson. First edition illustrated hardcover from J.B. Lippincott from back in 1940. Really interesting book. I've had this and sold this a couple of different times. This I just picked up actually on Monday as part of a big book pickup. I talked about a couple of weeks ago. I had done an estate buyout that I had access to all of the books before the sale even went public, and that they had found some additional boxes of books up in the attic. I picked those up on Monday. This was one of those. I'm into this for 41 cents. Had it listed for $24.99. Got an offer of $20 on eBay, which I went ahead and took. Buyer paid shipping and tax for a total of $27.88. I paid $4.24 in fees, $1.95 for promotion fees. Again, that cost of goods sold on this item was 41 cents. My total cost, $14.48. Net profit, $13.40. This sold within like 6 hours of being listed. I was listed kind of at the higher end of these because mine was in pretty good condition. And because my cost of goods sold was so low, I went ahead and took a pretty quick offer on this just to turn and burn it and get out from under it. Another one over on eBay. What is Modern Interior Design by Edgar Kaufman from the Museum of Modern Art. This was a illustrated paperback from 1953. This is another one. This sold on an outgoing offer. Had it listed for $24.99, sold for $21.24 plus shipping and tax. I paid $4.24 in fees, $1.95 in promoted listing fees, $4.63 to ship, which was paid, of course, by the buyer. Cost of goods sold on this one, 54 cents, part of a big lot. Net profit, $14.51. Another one on eBay, Region of Murcia by the Institute de Amento, hardcover. This was an area business promotion booklet from like a chamber of commerce in Spain. Really nice condition. This was part of a big 650 odd book lot that I picked up probably 4 or 5 months ago. Listed and sold for $23.99. I believe, if I remember correctly, this is both in English and in Spanish. So a real interesting piece in really fantastic condition. Was published in the 1990s. Sold for $23.99 plus shipping. Shipping was actually $6.88. I don't know why I've got $3.88 on there, nor do I know why I have a black block in the middle of the description. I need to pay more attention. The buyer paid a total of, would have been 20, would that be right? Yeah, $29.57. I paid $4.65 in fees. Cost of goods sold, 38 cents. Net profit, $16.31. Wrong button. Here we go. Part of the big religious book lot that I bought. Gosh, it's probably coming up on 2 months ago now. This is Seventh-day Adventists Answer Questions on Doctrine from 1957. Hardcover in its dust jacket, published by the Review and Herald. This was in pretty nice condition. I've had this book previously. It sells fairly well, fairly quickly, and brings relatively decent money. This sold for $24.99 plus shipping, $4.85 in fees. Cost of goods sold was just 20 cents as part of a big bulk buy. My net profit, $19.94. This sold at the end of the week. The Walter Hagen story from 1956. First printing illustrated hardcover in its dust jacket. The dust jacket was not in very good shape. There was quite a bit of damage, but this is a really unusual piece. Had it been in better shape, this is probably a $45 or $50 book. Mine was not in great shape. I had it listed for $29.99. I got an offer of $25, which I accepted. Buyer also paid shipping. This is actually part of the international shipping program. This was going to England. I don't recall what they paid total in shipping. The domestic portion of it was $5.38. I paid $4.58 in fees. Cost of goods sold as part of a big lot, just 50 cents. Net profit, $19.92 for the Walter Hagen story. First printing from 1956. Another one on eBay, a tribute to Lincoln County veterans from West Virginia. That is by Bob Vandelind, a paperback illustrated, in pretty nice condition. I had someone reach out. I had sent out an offer to a watcher on this, and they sent me a message asking if there were any family members from a certain last name So when I was over at the warehouse Monday morning, I grabbed the book, took a quick flip through the index, and found about a half a dozen people actually from that particular family. Sent them a quick picture of that page and said, I don't know if there are more articles, but here are the people that are mentioned in the index, and the customer bought it. This was listed, I think, for $29.99 and sold for $26.39 plus shipping. Paid $4.99 in fees, no promoted listing fees on this one. Cost of goods sold, 38 cents. Net profit, $21.02. Another one on eBay. Look again, landmark architecture in downtown Toledo and the Old West End. This is a hardcover first printing from 1973. Really nice book about the architecture in downtown Toledo, Ohio. This was part of a big lot of books I picked up in kind of northwest Ohio some time ago. In reasonably good condition, a little bit of wear on the cover, no dust jacket, but an unusual piece. The only other ones listed were trade paperbacks. I had the only hardcover that was listed, and it sold in less than a week for $29.99 plus shipping. $5.76 in fees. Again, no promoted listing fees. It was a pretty decent week, actually, on that front. I normally, as I talk about, 60 to 65% of all of my sales come from promoted listings. Last week, it was probably less than half. I don't know why that is. My sales were actually up compared to where they had been the last couple of weeks. So it wasn't a case of like being out promoted on things. It was just one of those weeks where I had a lot of stuff sell through organic exposures. The order total on this was $37.92, including shipping and tax. I paid $5.76 again in fees, 50 cents cost of goods sold. My net profit, $23.73. Neat old book about Toledo, Ohio. This was a interesting one. I'd never seen this book. I talk about these old religious books all the time. This was the Traditional Values Holy Bible King James Version, an illustrated paperback, second printing from 1991. Didn't look like anything special. I was at an estate sale on the last day of the sale last fall, and there were a handful of books kind of buried. I pulled this thing up, and I almost didn't even look it up. I'm like, this is just a generic Holy Bible paperback. I'm like, but I'm here, and there's only like 10 more books to look at. So I looked it up, and lo and behold, it's a $32 book, and they were selling books for 50 cents. So I went ahead and bought it. It did sell for $31.99 plus shipping. The order total $39.93. $5.90 in fees. Again, no promoted listing fee. Cost of goods sold, as I mentioned, 50 cents. Net profit $25.59. Interesting. This is one that I would not have anticipated seeing on the shelf would be worth that kind of money. Not that $31.99 is huge money, but when you only got 50 cents in it, that's a pretty good flip. Another one from a big lot. This is from the 1800 book lot from a few months ago. This is the Anthology of Japanese Literature by Donald Keene. It's 2 hardcover volumes in a slipcase from 1956. Slipcase had a little bit of wear. The books were practically like new because they'd been in this slipcase sleeve. Really nice condition. These sold for $32.99 plus shipping as a set. $6.20 in fees. This did sell through a promoted listing, $2.95 there. Cost of goods sold again, 50 cents. When I do a bulk buy like that, and I've got, for instance, this is 2 books in a sleeve, I count this as one item. If this had been 2 separate books, not in its slipcase, I would have counted it as I counted these in as 2 items. But because it was sold to me in the slipcase as one item, that's how I accounted for it. So that's why this is 50 cents, not $1, for those of you keeping score at home. Again, my total costs $18.81 for a net profit of $23.34. Neat collection. 2 books on eBay, also from that big 1800 book lot. This was, I mentioned when I did that particular purchase that I bought all the books that were in kind of the one room, and then they opened the door to another part of the basement, and there were thousands more books, more than I was willing to take on, because a lot of them did not appear to be high value. They were books that they had listed either in sets or groups or individually in an online auction that they were running, most of which, of course, did not sell. So they gave me the opportunity to go through them. I did go through and I picked, I don't know, a couple of hundred books out of it. And I, unfortunately, I had to leave them to deal with the rest. But this was two of those: Cooking the Russian Way by Musia Soper from 1961, published by Spring Books, and Cooking the German Way by Nella Whitfield, also by Spring Books in 1960. Two hardcovers with their dust jackets in really nice condition. Was into these for 50 cents a piece. They sold for a total of $39.98, so $19.99 each from 50 cents originally. That's a pretty decent flip. Customer paid shipping and tax for a total of $48.80, $7.12 in fees. Again, no promotion fee on this one. Cost of goods sold totaled $1. Net profit $31.86. New York Times Magazine. This sold over on Etsy. This is a April 1946 Franklin D. Roosevelt 1 year after memorial. This is like a tabloid magazine, kind of like a National Enquirer sized newspaper, newsprint magazine commemorating the death of FDR in April of 1946. This was stuck in a box in part of the 650 book lot that I purchased from an estate sale last fall. Listed for $49.99 plus shipping, sold on Etsy at 10% off for $44.99. So really nice flip. Fees $5.06. No offsite ad fee on this one. I did ship this out by first class. Well, not first class. Come on, Ryan. It's 2025. Ground Advantage. It did not have any ads in it, but I was concerned that as a kind of a newspaper type item, if it was to be inspected, it might be an issue. So I did go ahead and ship this by Ground Advantage. So I paid $5.31 to ship this thing, 38 cents cost of goods sold, net profit $38.87. Another one on Etsy. This was part of a big estate buyout that I did. Probably the end of August. There was a bunch of like organic gardening and farming books at this house. This is the American Farmer's Horse Book, a pictorial cyclopedia written by Andrew Darling way back in 1892. Hardcover, not in particularly great shape, but from 1892 at a cost of 50 cents. I thought it was worth taking a shot on. Listed it and sold it on Etsy, $49.99. It did get 10% off, so it sold for $44.99 plus shipping. The buyer paid a total of $55.78, $5.34 in fees. 50 cents again was my cost of goods sold. $16.36 were my total costs. $39.42 in net profit on the American Farmer's Horse Book. I mentioned this in the Wednesday Live. Paperback book. Kind of timely with what's going on in the wider world right now. This is Inside the Aquarium, The Making of a Top Soviet Spy by Viktor Suvorov. This was a first edition Berkeley paperback in not really very good condition, to be fair. A lot of wear on the cover, a lot of tanning of the pages, but this is a really, really difficult book to find. I had it listed originally for $124.99. I've had it for quite some time. This was part of the big 15,000 book lot. So this was part of last month's clearance sale. It was listed on sale for $93.74 plus shipping, and that is what it sold for. Really nice flip. That lot I was into for less than 4 cents a book, so cost of goods sold 4 cents. I did again send this by Ground Advantage to take advantage of the insurance rather than paying $1 for insurance and spending $5.63. I just did Ground Advantage for $5.14, which was less money, and still got $100 worth of coverage. Winning. Paid $13.95 in fees, $6.89 in promoted listing fees. Again, the cost of goods sold was 4 whole cents. Total cost to me, $26.02. Net profit, $72.35. This is our flip of the week, and I mentioned this one on Wednesday as well because when I got this order, this one did not have a street address. It makes it hard. Makes it very hard to ship when I don't have a full address. This was 8 volumes of Messages and Papers of the Presidents. This was published in the early 1900s I picked this up off of a Facebook Marketplace ad. They had the entire set. I think it was 20 some volumes in total. I got these for $2 a piece in total. This customer bought 8 of these. They subsequently submitted another order for 1 more. I don't have that one shown here, but they ultimately bought 9 of these books. I've had them for a long, long time. When I bought them, I thought they would be nice, quick flips. That did not turn out to be the case, but here, finally, I've sold 9 volumes in the span of like 24 hours, and I will take it. The buyer paid a total of $129.53. I think these were $16.59 a piece or something like that on sale over on Etsy. The buyer paid $20.38 for shipping, $12 in tax for an order total of $161.91. I paid $15.20 in fees. Unfortunately, this customer found these through Etsy's offsite ad program, so an extra 15%, $23.07. This is still a fun sale, but it would have been a lot more fun without that. The shipping cost was $20.38. Cost of goods sold, again, $2 a piece, so $16 total. My total cost, $86.65. Net profit, $75.26, which is still in all a pretty nice flip. So that is what was going on here for last week. It was not, I went out, I talked about in my normal Instagram Saturday morning update. I was out twice last week sourcing. The first was Monday when I went to pick up the found boxes from the attic at the One Estate sale. It ended up being, I believe, 16 boxes of books, 383 books, and 28 magazines all in, that I had offered them $10 a box, which they went ahead and took. So that worked out to about 40 cents a piece on the books and about 10 cents a piece on the magazine. So that was a really good buy. Friday, there was an estate sale in Cincinnati. The ad online showed a ton of books, and it's a seller who historically is really, really reasonable on books. In fact, the last sale that I was at of theirs, I had 2 full tubs full of books, and they told me I could just take them if I would just get them out of their way. So I was like, this should be a pretty good sale. So I drove an hour to get to the sale. Line around the block. So I waited an hour to get into the sale, only to find a sign on the wall that said hardcovers were $4 a piece and paperbacks were $3, which is a bit much. Given what was there, I only stayed maybe 25 minutes. I looked at probably 35 or 40 books that I thought might be interesting and have some value. And they did. If they'd have been $1 or $2, they probably would have been worth doing. But they were books that were going to retail online for $10 to $12. And at $1 or $2, that makes sense. At $4, by the time you add in the fees and the potential of a promoted listing fee and the shipping and everything else, I just couldn't make that math work. So I left that sale actually empty-handed. There was some reasonably good stuff there, but there was nothing outstanding. And at $4 a piece, I just couldn't make the math work. They had a complete set of the, whatever they are, the Harvard, 5 foot of books thing with the Harvard classics. Normally, I'll try to buy those if I can get the whole set because I can usually get them pretty cheap. They were asking $5 a piece for those. They sell routinely individually for $7.99 plus shipping. If I can buy them for 50 cents, I'd have bought them. At $5 a book, I couldn't make it make sense. So sometimes I did a video on it, probably 3 years ago. Sometimes you got to know when to say no, and you got to just walk away. There was some stuff there I would have loved to have had, but not at that price. So you can let me know what you think of that. Let me know what you think of any of the things that we talked about today. Please leave me a comment down below. If you got something out of this, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button on YouTube. Leave us a review if you're listening to the podcast somewhere. Again, if you're not currently a subscriber to the YouTube channel or a follower of the podcast, please consider doing that. I would love to have you on board. We will see you Wednesday for another live edition. We'll probably take a look at least at how I use Etsy. list perfectly to list on Etsy. One of the questions that came up in last week's live was how I do listings on Etsy in particular. So I will kind of preload some listings on Wednesday morning so that when we sit down live, I can just show you how I use List Perfectly to cross post to both Mercari and to Etsy. So you can kind of see how List Perfectly works, at least to the extent that I use it. As I've said previously, I don't take full advantage of everything that they offer. I don't use them to create my listings. I don't use them to control my inventory. I do all of that manually, but I'll walk you through that process so you can at least see how I'm doing it and what the information is that List Perfectly at least is able to transfer over from eBay to those other sites. So again, thank you for spending a little bit of your time here with me this week. And until next time, my friends, it's time to sell. Thanks, guys. You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.